Welcome to Biography, a podcast about the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I'm Wendy Buskey.
And I'm Adron Buskey. And this episode, we're going to be talking about the news that just dropped that kind of shocked the skating and ice dance world in particular, which is the return of the Shibutani siblings. There's a lot to kind of dig into about that. This was not the episode we had intended to do this week. We were originally supposed to have another guest interview episode, and we didn't end up being able to record that because the internet at our house has been garbage for the past week, and we've had constant failings and stuff, which has caused us a lot of problems.
Which might be why our last episode was a couple of days late.
Right, yeah. And so we weren't able to record that interview yet because we haven't had a dependable internet connection in a while. And then in the same time period, this news about the Shib Sibs coming back dropped. And it's worth digging into because I think this is the thing that happens in the run up to the Olympics. It seems like every season.
This is a little bit more shocking, though. There's always somebody who kind of steps back in, but this is up there with some of the biggies that have happened in the past.
It's funny to me that I think that for the last couple of years, when we off mic have talked about who could come back, the Shib Sibs have come up a lot. You've mentioned them repeatedly. Now, if you've been a listener to the show for a while, one repeated thing you'll know that will come from the two of us is that you are generally more receptive to this kind of thing or more likely to be excited about somebody making a return. And I hate it. I know we're the Parks and Rec of skating podcasts. And that
I hold that very dearly to my heart.
Yes. And we try not to be a gossip show, and we try to be as positive while being honest and critical and saying how we actually feel about things, but we're not about digging into the dirt or the drama or whatever.
No,
That's not
I don't
our
like
thing,
that
generally
at all.
speaking. But I am most of the time not a big fan of the comebacks of specifically like champions, the people who have already gotten their gold or gotten their big wins and then dip out for a while and then come back at the last minute for another opportunity while other people have done the work for years. And then you just have a sort of legacy athlete step back in. That's not something I'm a big fan of in general.
It's complicated. Now, I'm going to step us into the Wayback Machine. Just give me a moment. So in 1994, I know that may be before some people listening were born, but I was alive and I was really excited because they changed the rules to allow people who had been skating as professionals, i.e. making money by skating and touring full time, coming back into the competitive landscape right before the 1994 Lillehammer Olympic Games. And that meant that the current swath of skating stars that had been competing now had the likes of Brian Boitano, Katarina Witt, Katerina Gordieva, and Sergei Grinkov, and Jane Torval and Christopher Dean just stepping right back on in. You couldn't ask for more legendary skaters in that era to walk right back in. You had 4 Olympic champions just raise their hand, amongst others. Victor Petrenko came back, another Olympic champion. So many people just decided to waltz back in right before that season began. And we're seeing the same thing, not with Olympic champions, but with Olympic medalists, with the Shib Sibs coming back. And from that point in 1994, I feel like there has always been an expectation that the big stars would come back. Earlier today, we were even referencing like when Michael Jordan came back to basketball after a brief time away playing golf and baseball and then won 3 more NBA titles. And it's not out of the norm, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to love it because to your point, it shakes things up in a very big way. And I'm really curious to see what this iteration, plus, let's not forget, we also have Guillaume Cizeron and Laurence Fournier-Boudre heading back into competition too. So it's getting wild.
Yeah, and there's some rumors about some other potential returns as well that we have nothing solidified on. But
No,
just
there's
like
social media rumors at this point, but there's a few that feel fairly legit.
There's 3 things I'm happy to see left in the 90s and in the past in general, and that is the 6.0 judging system, compulsories, or school figures, which is not a term I knew until literally last night when we watched a biography episode from 2001 that just surfaced on YouTube about Olympic gold medalist women in the US. It's a fascinating watch, and I learned a lot because I am not a student of history with this sport. I knew about skating in the 90s, but I didn't start watching until the 2000s, and I've never been particularly interested in the pre-2000 era. But I have learned a lot about it recently from doing this show, but also particularly just from watching this thing last night. But yeah, I had never heard school figures before. I knew compulsories. I think that's terrible. I'm glad those are not a thing.
Such a controversial man you are.
There are some people who like them, and I've seen people even in the comments of that biography episode saying we should really bring back compulsories. And I'm like, why would you want something that dull and that nitpicky? Oh my gosh, like that is just for the most anal retentive of sports fans. But that's fine. If that's your thing, that's cool. It's just not for me, okay? I couldn't imagine wanting to do that. It just sounds miserable. But beyond that, the other thing that I'm happy to see left in the dust is the separation between the amateur athlete and the pro athlete.
That I agree with. That I 100% agree with. I hated it.
It's never made sense to me that a elite competitive athlete must not be able to make money doing the thing that they do.
Mm-hmm.
That is so bizarre to me, particularly considering how expensive it is to do this sport, how challenging it is to balance a life where you have a full-time job and do this as a competitor. You know, when it costs $60,000 a year for like a pairs team or even a single skater to be able to do this, and then you're saying, oh no, you can't go out and make money, or if you do, it has to be put in like a trust fund or something that you can't get until you retire.
And it varied by country what those rules were and everything. But yeah, basically it was just like the title of I am now a professional skater. Then you were out of the Olympics. You couldn't go back until they changed the rule in 94.
And I know that same kind of thing happened with basketball in the Olympics when they opened it up to professional players.
Same year.
Then that's when we got the Dream Team.
Hell yeah, we did.
Yeah, and it made Olympic basketball way more interesting, but also meant that the U.S. fielded a team that was literally unstoppable.
It had Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson on the same team.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. It's nuts.
Scottie Pippen. I could go on and on. I loved that
This
team.
is a special interest of Wen's is basketball in that era of time.
90s basketball was awesome.
Yeah, it was legit.
I love you, David Robinson, forever. Anyway.
This is where we find out in the comments if we have any crossover. People who are
no one knows what I'm talking about.
Well, it's like I've seen that there seems to be a weird amount of crossover between skating fans and F1 fans.
F1 is so popular right now.
It is baffling to me. I mean, that's cool. I mean, I like a lot of stuff that other people don't understand for sure. But the appeal of racing sports is completely beyond me. I don't get it at all. But that skating fans and F1 fans have this crossover that's
I find it interesting.
It is fascinating. It's like a weird Venn diagram of how those things came together. I don't know. It's like it's so utterly opposite ends of the spectrum. But anyway, to get back to what we're talking about here, unlike that era when you were talking about in the 90s when all those people came back, I wasn't a fan then. I wasn't watching then. So I don't really have feelings about them returning other than I think it's completely legitimate that they got rid of that pro designation and allowed people to come back and compete, because I could see why people who had been in it for a long time were ready to make some money. And also, not for nothing, that was an era where people could make money skating.
Yes.
And it was a hilarious thing to me in that biography episode that we watched. When I say biography, that's literally the name. I think it was like, I don't know if it was PBS or if it was
a PBS series.
Yeah, it's literally called Biography. If you look it up on YouTube, you can find it. They posted this just in the last week or so. But a lot of the opening part of that episode was insisting that skating could be highly lucrative and that having a gold medal basically made you a millionaire. They were like, Christy Yamaguchi was on the cover of magazines and cereal boxes, and those deals are worth tons of money. And sure, yeah, those things are. But it seemed to be this thing that they reinforced a lot in the early part of that biography episode, that being a skater is a path towards fame and riches.
Yes.
And that is just not the case today.
Not at all.
There are certainly some people who have managed to make money, but it seems like it's a little bit more on the influencer end, where they can leverage their followings on TikTok and Instagram in order to get some sponsorships. And a handful of them are notable enough to be featured in some way elsewhere. And other countries have some real opportunities.
Yes, there are celebrity skaters in like Japan
and Korea, and looking at some of the stuff that's happened with, say, like Nina Petrikina in Estonia, and also the Celeb Bros there. and the rise of Mikhail Shidorov, where now like his country seems to be very aware of him and he's getting like photo shoots and stuff.
I love Mikhail.
Yeah, and that's so exciting. But here in the States, we're so oversaturated with sports that it just isn't top of mind in any significant way. And so it's just an interesting time capsule to look at them saying in 2001, skating is a path to millions. And in 2025, skating is a path to credit card debt. It's a very telling and interesting change over the course of a quarter century. But anyway, circling back to what we're talking about here, this is an instance where you have a team that have been in the Shibutani siblings, have been retired, or at the very least out of the sport for 7 years. That 7 years is, for me as a fan, pretty significant because my hardcore fandom is really over like the last like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And in the time period where Merrill Davis and Charlie White and Tessa and Scott are all skating, that was a time period where I was aware of those top teams, but I just didn't care about ice dance really at all. I really did like Merrill and Charlie. They were the first team that I saw that struck my fancy. I thought ice dance was incredibly boring from before I was a fan to even when you really introduced me to it in a significant way, like all of the sport. Ice dance was the least interesting to me.
It took a while. Like I tried. For any fans out that are aghast, I tried. I showed him Shaylin Bourne and Victor Kratz. He does not remember that now because he has no recollection of Shaylin as a skater.
Nope.
She is a choreographer. I'm speaking for you. I apologize.
That's true.
But I'm defending myself as a lifer. It's the like I showed him Klimlova and Ponomarenko.
Oh, I remember watching that one. I thought they were awful. This was a case where we were having a conversation about Anthony Ponomarenko, and you're like, well, his parents were these really famous ice dancers. And I was like, oh, that's some interesting context.
I did not know that.
I did not know this. Please educate me. And so you showed me one of their iconic performances. And what I was struck about it was they were slow. They never left the middle of the ice. The outfits were wretched, as was the makeup.
Is anyone still listening? I hope you guys aren't mad.
You know, I'm sure, again, I'm not from that era. So
no, that's true.
I'm watching it not as a person who appreciated ice dance in its moment.
Because what ice dance is now is so radically different from what it was then.
Yeah.
I think that's the essence of what you're saying. It is not the same sport.
No, absolutely not. And things that you'll see criticisms lodged now are like, they skated a little slow here, or they didn't hit the corners of the ice, or aspects of the drama or the intensity or the quality of the twizzles or whatever. I watched the standing ovation performance and I was like, this wouldn't survive into the top 20 at a current
Under
event.
the current guidelines, it's entirely different.
Because the sport's changed a lot.
Well, right. And I think that actually goes right back into Maia and Alex. 7 years is not nearly as long as, Anthony Ponomarenko's parents in terms of how long they've been away from the sport. But that said, the +-5 system for judging didn't exist then. The choreography elements are very different. What served the Shib Sibs so brilliantly in their competitive career has changed wildly to now. So how they come back and use 7 years of experience and growth as people towards their skating will be really interesting because it is not the same sport that they left.
So there's a lot of other context around this that I, again, as somebody who really only got deep into the sport after they were gone, and I liked them in their moment when I did watch ice dance. I always appreciated them as a team. I always liked what they brought to the ice.
Their Fix You program is iconic.
Yeah. But I will say that I have been far more interested in them in the years since. I have followed them on Instagram forever. I think that their work as authors and speakers, as essentially ambassadors, the stuff that they have done for like diversity and inclusion, and just as individuals, I think they're fascinating. I also like Alex's photography.
He's very talented.
Yeah, I think that they've had this really great career post the ice. And because of that, it's sort of baffling for me that they would come back to it. And I can get that you maybe just miss it, or you felt that you had to walk away, at least in part because Maia did have an illness. I think she had kidney cancer.
She had kidney cancer. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a frustrating and pretty emotionally crushing way to have your competitive career cut short. I totally get that. I'm not going to retread all these things that I read earlier, but I will say that right before we were getting ready to record, Capades dropped a Substack email about all of this that had a pretty comprehensive walkthrough of the Shib Sibs' initial career and how it related to a lot of other teams in that moment, the judging, the drama of the coaching that they had and how that split and came apart, and particularly the rivalry that they had with Madison Chalk and Evan Bates. And I was cognizant of none of this. None of that was on my radar at all because I just wasn't paying enough attention to ice dance in that era to know or care about it. And a lot of this was, again, pre some of the social media age where a lot of this stuff was easy to keep track of or watch. So I didn't know any of that until literally an hour ago when I was reading it. And I haven't had a chance to independently verify all the things that newsletter said. But the really short version is just simply that they came up in an era where a number of teams were with one coaching situation with two very notable coaches,
Igor Spielband and Marina Zueva,
who had an acrimonious divorce, split their school. Most of those teams went with Marina. Chalk and Bates went with Igor. And this is well before IAM became the powerhouse that it is now. But there was a lot of drama in that. And then between those two teams and then Madison Hubble and Zachary Donahue, they were basically just playing hot potato with awards and placements. And that the rivalry, particularly between the Shib Sibs and Chalk and Bates, seemed to culminate in the 2018 Olympics, where the Shib Sibs had the option in the team event as the higher internationally ranked team to choose whether they would do just one event at it or if they would do two in the team. And they opted to do both, which edged out both Madison Chalk and Evan Bates and Hubble and Donahue and kept them from competing in team, which seems to have led the Madison teams, Hubble and Donahue and Chalk and Bates, to basically make a pact for the next Olympics that they would split the team event, which worked out in their favor because they all did really well and they came away with gold medals in the end after a very fraught history that probably a lot of you know, but
they still got it.
Yeah, they have golds now. So anyway, there is this big historical semi-drama that seems at the back end of all of this, but in the end, I don't really care so much about that. What I care about and what makes me frustrated on some of this, I think I've talked about this a little bit before on the show, but one of the things I think is both a help and hindrance of this sport is its identity as an Olympic sport, which is that everything's a quadrennial. Everything is about the next 4 years. Everything's about what we get to the Olympics. World championships and every other championships are great and important and very valuable in your resume as a skater. But at the end, an Olympic gold medal is the defining piece of this sport. And so many Olympic sports have this issue where everything that happens outside of the Olympics is gravy. It's not like, say, American football, where the Super Bowl happens every year and that is the culmination of the year. And every year is a brand new opportunity to be on top and to get that ring and to get that trophy. Same with the World Series or so many other sports. So there isn't this sense of, well, like when Michael Jordan came back to the Bulls and then they were, they had another dynasty of another 3 years of championships. It wasn't like he came back in the last season right before an Olympics and just restaked his claim at the last minute without competing, because that's just not the way a year-over-year sport works that doesn't have quadrennials. And figure skating suffers from fandoms that only pay attention at the Olympics.
Yes.
And a competition that seems to be so incredibly wrapped around that culmination at the Olympics. The Olympics happen and then a quarter of the competitors retire immediately following. And the Worlds right after the Olympics is always bereft of a number of the top competitors. And so you get a softer competition. It's just a weird thing.
It is. I mean, we're seeing something similar with skiing. Lindsey Vonn came back and is coming back to go to the Olympics again, which in its own way, I find super impressive that a woman who has aged out, and I hate to make it age-based, but I mean, skiing is incredibly taxing on the body. And the fact that after several years of being away from it, she decided, you know what, I'm going to do this again. It's very Deanna Stellato Dudek coded. I like it. The difference is that Deanna hasn't made it to an Olympics yet. And Lindsey Vonn is Lindsey Vonn. I don't know. I always have mixed feelings about it because I totally see where you're coming from, that it does kind of suck. The idea of you had been champions before. I mean, look at Guillaume Cizeron. He is the reigning Olympic champion in ice dance, and he had left competition and now he's coming back with a new partner. So it's different, but he's potentially taking the spot away from obviously going to be like Demoget and Lemosier. And that sucks for them. For the Shib Sibs, we have no idea what to expect with them. They had been Olympic bronze medalists upon their retirement, whether intentional or unintentional, and whether they were planning to come back for 2022 or not. They're coming back now. And what does that mean? To me, it doesn't affect Chalk and Bates outside of they now will be asked questions constantly about it.
Right, yeah.
But they're the 3-time reigning world champions. They're fine. I think at most for them, it is a extra bit of drama in their Olympic season. But in terms of them competitively, I'm not worried about it. But for CPOM, for Carrera Ponomarenko, what does it mean for them? They are obviously our number 2 team. Obviously. And I don't think I'm concerned about where they rank at nationals, say. We'll see how that goes. It's more once you get to that team competition, what happens? Are Maddie and Evan going to do both parts in the team? Are they going to select 2? And then who gets it? I would assume it would be Carrera and Ponomarenko, but who knows if the Shib Sibs actually get that 3rd spot? Not to say anything of Green and Parsons or Zingis and Kolznick or Emily Brody and Ian Somerville,
or the Brown siblings.
Or the Brown siblings. All of these incredible teams that have been pushing harder and harder and harder to get that 3rd spot. Particularly Green and Parsons moved way back up this season. And Zingis and Kolznick are so good and just keep getting better. And they're with Igor Spielbahn, just to bring the drama back into this. There are so many complications with it. So am I happy that, say, Maia gets to come back and finish things on her own terms? Sure.
Yeah.
Do I think it sucks that it could potentially take the Olympic spot away from, like, I'm just going straight at Green and Parsons after they just missed getting a spot last time? Yeah, I think that sucks too.
So the Nice Capades, and that's a worthwhile follow if you don't know them. They're on Substack, which is not a platform that I have a lot of love for, but their newsletters are really good and they're worth reading. They made a really great point. Let's take scores aside and look at the politics of the sport and the longevity of it. You know, Chalk and Bates are retiring after this next Olympics.
Yeah.
So they have one more season and they are done. Christina Carrera and Anthony Ponomarenko are poised to be our next in line, essentially, within the U.S. And all of the hierarchy elements of ice dance aside, CPOM are a really strong team. Now, I'm not entirely certain about Christina's citizenship yet because she, I think, is a Canadian. So I think that she has been working towards her citizenship. I don't know if that's done yet. So there is a bit of a question mark around that, as there are for a lot of different teams, but they are kind of the team of the future. And so if the Shibutani siblings come back in here, and let's just assume that they are very good. It's been 7 years. We have no idea what they look like now.
I can't imagine they would unretire if they weren't doing really well.
Yeah. The question will be if the U.S. Fed gets behind them because they are an established name. They are Olympic medalists.
I mean, their big announcement video was with the U.S. Fed. So obviously they're getting support.
Right. Yeah. So this has been figured out well ahead of time. It has echoes of
Guillaume and Lolo.
Yeah. And how the French Fed made a big deal out of that.
Yes.
If that feels like the Fed is behind it, then it becomes is the Fed going to be trying to push them into that Olympic spot? And if they do so, they're pushing in a team that more than likely is a 1-season team.
Yeah.
The chances that the Shibutani siblings continue on post the Olympics feels pretty small. They are 30 and 34 now and have not competed for 7 years. And the idea that they would stick around for another quadrennial afterwards seems fairly unlikely. I could be wrong. I don't know what's inside their head, and I haven't seen them make any statements about that, but this really feels like the Olympic Hail Mary. So if they decided to kind of basically take this legacy team and just slide them ahead of their next up-and-comers, that could really be problematic for the U.S. Fed post the Olympics.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like a long game play. It feels like trying to strengthen a Olympic team, but at the cost of what it would do to the program afterwards.
This is where it gets really tricky. And it actually goes back to our last episode where we were talking to Haley from FS.Skating Stand. There is an element of how do we get, as we've been talking about all season, really we've been talking about since the inception of this show, how do we get more people interested in this sport? How do we get people excited? And oftentimes skating leans on nostalgia. How do we get people back in? We bring them the people that they might recognize back and show them, look, they're at the Olympics. The sport's still great. But does it keep them long term? It might get them to tune back in and make the stories really exciting so that people are tuning in to see this team that they had maybe seen years ago and loved. But does it keep them? Because if Alex and Maia, to your point, just retire right after that, and then they're watching the next competition and there's nobody there that they know anymore, how does that work? Are they just continuing to be excited about the sport? Maybe. Or maybe they just tune out because the people that they were excited about are gone.
Yeah.
It is tricky business.
I like that you mentioned nostalgia because I think that nostalgia is a really double-edged sword. On one level, nostalgia sells. And I'm a person who, you can't see the home office studio we're recording in, but it is full of a whole bunch of collectible things that come from things I am nostalgic about. And it operates very successfully in a lot of different type of businesses. But it sometimes is a representation of weakness in a sector. Like when you see the movies suddenly lean really heavily on nostalgia properties or things
all
like
the reboots.
Yeah, when Star Wars recycles its same ideas over and over again. When the Marvel movies bring back Robert Downey Jr. because they're starting to flag and they feel like they need that name value back in to drive some interest. Things like that. It just feels like sometimes it's the play of a company or a creative or a business sector that is doing it because they know they're in a moment of disadvantage and they're like, oh, but wait, you liked this. And then they bring back something that they can win a few points with.
Yep.
I'm not saying that that's what's happening here, but I think that you're right that it feels like that is probably somewhere in the conversation for the US Fed. And I feel like that's talking all the way around just the quality of both the people and the skaters who are Maia and Alex Shibutani. The real questions are, after 7 years and after being away from a sport that's changed a lot since they were in it, what team do they emerge as on the ice? Because they were a highly technical team, extremely proficient technical team that had really good performance value, but that wasn't really their selling point. They're also a sibling team, and sibling teams always come with that advantage of being so genetically well matched to each other, but they come with the disadvantage of subject matter and character work that they cannot do. We see that hinder teams like the Browns, the Mravziks, the Toshlers, that are all terrific teams, but they have whole storytelling elements that they cannot do, and they cannot rely on a certain level of charisma with each other than that platonic sibling kind of energy. With the Shib Sibs coming back in their 30s and without competition for 7 years, are they going to be able to harness that same level of technical ability? Will they have developed into performers that can put out the kind of performances that make crowds go crazy now? And I'm sure a lot of fans are going to be so excited about it. Some of you have already been in our comments telling us that you're so excited about this because it's a team that you loved and they're coming back. I get that. But the question again is, will they be viable for a 1-year run?
It's hard to say, but it is going to make it, to quote Olivia Smart from her Instagram reel recently, juicy.
Yeah.
This season is going to be juicy. And to me, that makes me uncomfortable because I'm not into the sport for the juice and the drama. I'm in it because I love the sport. However, I am curious to see how things play out with all of this season, because I do feel like, honestly, just the ice dance field is so deep worldwide.
Yeah.
Watching ice dance at Worlds this past March was astounding because you're watching the teams that are in 16th place. I don't even remember who that was. Those teams were still fantastic.
One fall washed Reed and Amber Livicus out of the free skate.
Exactly.
One fall on one
mistake.
element. and almost took out Turkeylan versus Luce because those 20 spots were so competitive.
Two of the best teams in the world.
There was no margin for error.
None.
And now you're injecting 2 additional teams in at the last minute that are made up of people who are all really strong, but are unproven in the current moment, either because they're a brand new team or because they've been gone from competition for so long. It's going to be really fascinating. I'm going to go back to that biography episode we were talking about again, because there was another thing in that show that they referenced that kind of made my hackles go up. It was them hitting really hard, multiple interviews with multiple coaches and competitive skaters and journalists that they talked to for that biography episode, where they hit how important rivalry is to the sport. How like no skater is quite up to the task unless they have a real rival that challenges them and pushes them. And I understand that mentality for sure. I mean, sports has, legendary rivalries that push people to do better and go farther and accomplish greater things.
And great competitors make great competitors.
Sure. And I liked that in the biography episode that they did say some of these things were dramatic, but a lot of them were completely mutual respect societies of people who pushed each other hard while being kind to one another, and that a lot of the stories that were in the media were also basically tabloid fare, drummed up kinds of things. But the sport was driven to its highest levels of popularity because of Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding and everything that happened back in the 90s with them. And that ever since then, there has been this sense that we need that again. We saw it in the mid-2000s with Johnny Weir and Evan Lysacek, and this constant narrative of how these two needed to be put up against each other, and how it very clearly made Evan Lysacek miserable.
It made Johnny miserable too.
Yeah,
but Johnny mostly was he was a more media savvy person who understood how to play with it a little bit, but obviously it was not fun for either of them.
Right. And Lysacek pieced right out of the sport after he got his Olympic medal and has kind of never looked back. So that kind of stuff can feel really toxic, especially when it becomes the thing that the media grabs onto in a big way. But I think in the years since then, I mean, you can maybe look at Gracie Gold and Ashley Wagner as another rivalry that was pushed really hard in American media. But in the time since, the sport has moved largely to this mutual appreciation society. When you looked at Nathan Chen versus Yuzuru Hanyu, they had nothing but respect for each other.
Yeah, they were fierce rivals, but who were also very sportsmanlike and kind to each other and very supportive of what the other one was doing. So I really feel like their rivalry, in quotes, changed the sport because they only spoke in like, yes, I obviously want to beat him, but also, did you see what he did? Like, incredible.
I can't do that. That's amazing. Yeah, I think in the current crop of skaters, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty that either don't know each other or don't particularly like each other or just don't get along or whatever, but an awful lot of
the two Belgian girls.
Yes, Luna and Nina, clearly no love lost there. But in general, it feels like the sport has shifted towards these people saying, hey, these are our peer group. We're friends. We adore each other. We support each other, and we can be both highly competitive and not crappy to each other.
That's what I love about the current skating vibe. It is so much more supportive than what I remember it being in the 80s and 90s. And I don't remember much of the 80s, but the 90s and the 2000s, it was very much a let's lift each other up. It's tide rises type mentality. It's Ilya being Ilya and being that fierce competitor who watches his rivals and is saying he's not playing games. But come on, I mean, he's definitely like having a little fun with it. But then he's also teaching them how he's jumping, his technique, and wants people to challenge him. It's so much healthier. And it's like, why is that a bad thing? Why does it have to be some acrimonious relationship? And I get ratings. I get drama sells. But again, going all the way back to the beginning, I like being the Parks and Rec podcast. So I don't like the drama.
Yeah.
I like Johnny Weir so much more now than I did like either of them back in the day, because now I understand it more. And also I hated all of the drama around it. I liked Daisuke Takahashi in that Olympics, I gotta admit.
Yeah, no, oh my gosh, yeah. Daisuke was robbed. But I guess what that all leads up to is just my fear that the media around skating, whether it will be the less savory aspects of social media, or it will be whatever press actually bothers to cover skating anymore, because there's not that many outlets that focus on it in the same way. I mean, we have some terrific ones like Golden Skate and people like Jackie Wong. And, we have 2 journalists that pay attention to the sport.
In the States, yeah.
I just worry that I use the term NBC-ification all the time, that it's just the press just slapping their hands together like, ooh, okay, we've got juice now. And now we've got something that we can point to and we can make narratives and we can either fabricate whole cloth drama or we can grab onto things. It's like with Lolo and Guillaume, where there's enough legitimate drama there because of Nikolai Sorensen and also because of the unfortunate relationship burnout of Gabby and Guillaume that lends a lot of queasy feelings to that partnership for a lot of people. And a lot of people, especially casual fans who aren't aware of any of it.
They don't even know any of it.
They don't know. So it doesn't affect them at all. And I respect that because I've been that fan. Like I've just been saying, I missed all of this stuff with the Shib Sibs back in the day. I had no idea about any of those things. I just watched the competitions. And when they were done, I moved on with my life and did everything else that I did. So sometimes not being a deep fan makes it easier to engage because you don't have to absorb the rest of these narratives.
Honestly, I am such a fan of this sport and desperately, desperately want more people to either rediscover their love of it or whole cloth discover something new to enjoy in the States, especially where it has been just fading over time. I am happy to have more generated conversation about the sport. Am I happy that it is about anything that is more in the drama landscape and not what the performances look like? Yes. However, I hope everyone is performing like killer programs next season and that we're not talking about all of this behind the scenes stuff. I just want to be talking about the programs themselves. I want them to be judged on the programs themselves, not the politics, not all the history, just what is on the ice.
Yeah, what you do on any given day, for sure.
Yes.
And particularly in ice dance, that always feels kind of fraught because reputation and politics and history and all that always plays in. Referencing that biography episode again, they were talking about in that episode things that would drive away fans. One was the compulsories because they said that most people found them unwatchable. And they were unwatchable. And that when they were worth 60% of the score,
60%
before the short program was introduced, they were worth 60%. And so people would go out and could skate lights out in the free program and still lose. And it was because of the compulsories, and fans hated that. It made no sense to people who watched those things in prime time. And that kind of thing, but then also murky judging that would give the win to people who clearly didn't earn it that day, drove a lot of people away from the fandom. And it 100%. Still does. It is still a problem every time we see inconsistent judging or we see somebody get awarded PCS scores that don't make sense compared to what they did in their performances. And what we need to see here going into this next season is people get scores based on what they did on the ice.
Yeah.
And ice dance is even more subjective than any of the rest of them.
Yep.
And what we don't want to see is legacy teams or super teams or whatever come in and just immediately be given high marks if they're not skating to that level. If they come in and they're absolutely undeniably fantastic and they bulldoze some of those junior teams or even like mid-tier teams that are very good and they just show that they're higher than them. I mean, if they're that good when they come in, they're that good. And that's an undeniable thing. But
they need to do it on the ice and not on reputation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to sit back and be like, I can't wait to see Olivia Smart and Tim Deke next season because those are the programs I'm waiting for.
Yeah, and from Olivia, the things she's talking about, she sounds pretty confident they're going to be at the Olympics. So I'm wondering what that means for Tim's citizenship, if they've got something in the works for it, because she didn't seem to mention any doubt because she was like, and, we have an opportunity to get a second team in. So it really sounds like they're confident that that's going to happen.
Not to mention the other Spanish team, but they were third in the free skate at Worlds. They go into the Olympics.
Yeah. Again, it's just citizenship. And in some countries, that's a harder task to pull off than others. And some federations have more pull with that regard. So who knows? We've got some time yet to figure out what's going to happen there. The two rumor mill things that we heard about, and this is really, really short, is one, it seems like a lot of online skating fans have become relatively convinced that Sui and Han are going to come back to pairs representing China.
And please take this with a grain of salt because this is entirely conjecture.
Yeah.
Because they were photographed in the same place at a pre-Olympic event.
This could be hard to Lulu. Let's be honest.
It could be hard to Lulu that Sway has a new partner.
Yeah, Sway has been skating with, his name is Lee. And I think they will be competing at the September Olympic qualifier event. I think that's supposed to happen.
That is supposed to happen as far as I understand it. But there's been rumblings online, and again, conjecture.
Big grain of salt.
Grain of salt.
Salt shaker.
That the Chinese Fed is not happy with the progress made with Lee and that they're trying to convince Han to come out of retirement. That could be a load of dookie. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see. But there has been rumblings from journalists in the space internationally that have said there will be at least one more other big announcement. And I think that's what's spurring on that conversation. I don't know that there would be a bigger comeback in terms of from the past Olympics than Sway and Han.
Yeah. And considering China just doesn't have any real elite competitors right now in every discipline, they have some very solid people. I mean, Dai Wei Dai and Bo Yang Jin are great in men's singles.
But they're not medal contenders. And the women are back of the pack. And in ice dance, they have some really great up and coming young teams, but they are just not at a competitive level where they're going to be real viable for a while yet. And in pairs, I mean, they've had one other decent team, but they didn't really seem to rise to the occasion over the course of the season. And they also just didn't compete for 2 years after the Olympics. Yeah.
Like anybody for them. So I think that China has just been really underrepresented over the last few years. And I could see why their Fed would say, hey, we need to bring the best of the best back into the fold. And I think that Sway and Han are my all-time favorite pairs team. So I have mixed feelings on the one level of I don't generally like the big comebacks like that, especially at the last minute before the Olympics. However, that's a federation that has nobody else representing them. So it's not like they'd be bumping off anybody there if there aren't any other strong competitive teams who are going to qualify. But again, we don't know that any of that is legit. And that could just be wishful thinking on the part of a lot of people. But the second part of what I was saying was that there are several different notable journalists internationally who are saying somebody else is coming back and they are big, but we don't know who that is.
Right. So Sway and Han would be legitimately huge. But I've seen lots of discussion of Vincent Zhou and how he got totally, for lack of a better word, COVID screwed him last time, and him coming back, I could totally see from a standpoint of just wanting the chance to potentially get on that single competition. He got to compete in the team.
Yeah, he has an Olympic gold medal.
He's doing just fine.
Yeah.
But getting that chance that he missed to spur him to a potential comeback, I don't know that that's going to happen, but it's one of them that I've seen, which does remind me on a not Olympic level. We did also see a tease that it looks like Isabella Flores has a new partner as well. So that's the other bit of tiny bit of ice dance news this past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about another one that is fraught with drama
I'm not
and
going there.
Crazy stuff in it.
Absolutely
yeah, Isabella
not.
Flores' whole personal history with Ivan Dostoyev and the stuff that he did, whatever, all those things.
I don't know.
It's too much.
Way too much.
Yeah. Anyway, I know this has been a really unstructured episode for us. I mean, normally we go by a pretty strong outline and we're tighter to it. This one's been all over the place. So I apologize if we've been a little messy in this one, but it definitely, this one sparks some complicated feelings.
I mean, the topic's messy.
Yeah. Y'all messy. But
ice dance messy.
Yeah, for sure. Looking ahead, we do have another guest episode who's going to be coming up here very soon. And then we also do have our Q&A episode coming up, this summer's Q&A episode. So if you haven't submitted your questions yet, drop in the comments on YouTube or on Spotify, or you can go to our Instagram and DM it to us, or go to our website at choreography.show, and there's a comment form there to send them in. Yeah,
and on Instagram also, if you have any trouble with the DMs, you could also just comment on our most recent post and we'll see it there.
Yeah, that works too. I know sometimes it doesn't want to let non-mutuals or whatever make things, even though it's...
I changed our settings, but who knows what's happening.
Yeah, Meta products are a disaster, so who knows. So anyway, let us know what you want us to talk about in the Q&A. I imagine that some of you will have strong feelings about our strong feelings, or at least my strong feelings in this episode, and you might have some questions about that. That's where to put them. And until we get around to that, for Choreography, I'm Adron Buskey.
And I'm Wendy Buskey.
And we will talk to you next time.
Bye.